Well, welcome. This is a huge venue. This is I usually do a presentation every year, but this is the biggest one, and it's not full, so I kind of feel like Weird Al performing in a Beyonce arena, but we're gonna have some fun, I promise, and it's gonna be interesting, and you're gonna learn a lot. So I'm Matt Sommer, I'm with Cegment, and I'm gonna have the panel introduce themselves, so if you all could tell us where you are, your title, one thing that you think that you do really good in your role that you could help other people with, and then lastly, if you could have a superpower. They don't know I'm asking these questions, so this is going to be interesting.
This is not a good thing.
If you had a superpower, what would it be and why? We'll start with you, John.
I'll start on the end.
Okay, Chris, you never have a lack of words, so we'll start with you.
What? Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Lucier. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management from the University of Delaware. And yes, it's a great venue, and thanks for really making it easy on us so that you all sat here. So that, hello over there. I don't want to, eye contact now. So my neck exercises will be done for the day. So the University of Delaware is a public flagship institution, University of Delaware. It's about 17,000 undergraduates. And like many small state schools, more of our students come from out of state than in state. We're about, of our entering class, it was 3,950 on census about a week ago. 2/3 of them are from out of state. Actually, 70% of them are out of state and 30% of them are in state. So what do I do really well that I think? Well, I think that I listen and collaborate well. And it's actually something that really I think is the absolute key and foundational to success in our business is to be able to listen and talk to our colleagues, both within our own university, within our colleagues across our profession, with our high school colleagues as we do this great work, and then collaborating and really figuring out how do we do things best to provide access and opportunity for all students and ensuring that they find their best fit. And I really, really do believe that, and that's kind of what keeps me motivated every day. If I had a superpower, it would probably be to grow hair.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that would be it, because, I do look at my pictures in 1979 and 80 when I was a college senior. Man, I look good. I can't even lie to you right now. That long flowing locks, I could have been in a rock band, etc. And now it is what it is. So that would be the superpower. So if you all can help me out with that, let me know.
Well, good morning. I'm Brent Benner. I'm with the University of Tampa. And at Tampa, we have we're really an international university. About 15% of our students come from about 140 different countries. We have students from every state. Only 25% of our students are Floridian. So we're a little bit different in that regard. And what I do well is I've got street cred when it comes to the FAFSA. And I have 4 kids. I have 3 of them in college right now, and I have a daughter who's a senior in high school. And what a great year to have a kid who's a senior in high school, with prior new SAT. She's applying to schools with about 5, that all have 5% acceptance rates. I'm really looking forward to this year, and so I'm living the dream, and I'm broke. So. And I'm a University of Louisville grad, so it's easy what I wish my superpower was, and it's to know who all the Derby winners in the next 20 years are, so I could win a lot of money.
I thought you were going to go for the national championship this year, too. Okay.
I think I should have went first. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Ambrose. I'm an associate director with Michigan State University. We are one of the 2 flagships in the state of Michigan, and our in-state population for the incoming cohort is about 70%. This year we brought in 7,900 students, which is not too bad and not our highest number, but right in our range. So our target number was 7,890, so that's pretty good for landing the ship, if you will. What I do really well, I tie a bow tie pretty well. Yeah. I've been doing this for about 25 years, long before it became popular, but I gotta tell you, I think I really started this craze because the young guys really think that I'm all it and all the rage. If I had a superpower, what would it be? I think the ability to just look at food ingredients and come up with crazy combinations that really work well together. So just to look at things and make that work. I like to cook a little bit on the side, so, but that would be it. Thanks,
I like
Matt.
that. Thank you, guys. So just kind of how we're going to go through this is we have a lot of data to share with you. So I'm going to do some slides talking through data, have the panel at certain spots give some feedback, and we want to leave some time at the end because I'm sure there's tons of questions about PPY and what people are doing. So that's kind of how we're going to go through this presentation. Just to give you a little bit of background, we visit at Cegment hundreds of colleges each year, and one huge topic this year has been PPY. So earlier this year, we did a PPY study, and this just shows you we actually interviewed or surveyed over 500 higher education admission financial aid professionals and then over 1,000 students and parents to get their feedback on what the colleges plan to do, what their expectations are, and what the family side's expectations are, and what they think about the whole prior year. As you can see from this slide, this is a breakdown. Just over half of the higher education side is in financial aid, with just over 4 out of 10 on the enrollment management admission side. 6 out of 10 are private colleges and universities, so about 60% of the respondents. That gives you a little bit of insight into that. On the family side, 63% that responded to the study were parents, 37% were current high school students. They're demographically spread across the United States. Out of this group, almost 7 out of 10 plan to apply for financial aid, and 31% do not plan to apply for aid. So when do families want to get their financial aid awards? As you all know, most in the past have been in the March timeframe. Around March 15th has always been very popular. This just breaks out for you what the families told us they would like as far as when they would get their award letters. They're not expecting you to move it up super early. The majority by far want it sometime in the December, January, February timeframe. So actually, I'd like to ask the panel at this point, if, one, you're changing the timing of your award letter, and if so, when you're changing it to. If you could give us some insight on that, that would be great. I'll start with you, Brent.
Okay, we're ready to package starting. We started admitting a week ago today, which is historically what we do on or around September 16th, and we are generally packaged that first week of January. We're not the first in the country, but we like to try to be. And so we're ready to go, and are going to start packaging on October 5th. And some of the things we've done is we've, really, we think we have a great net price calculator, a very accurate one, and we use Cegment for our net price calculator. There are a lot of good ones and a lot of bad ones out there, but I think this is really going to press the issue of net price calculators. Because think about if my daughter goes on a net price calculator site like today and puts in accurate information and gets, this is what your financial aid package is, and then she's admitted and gets a financial aid package in November, and it's awry from that. And a lot of research indicates only about a third of the net price calculators out there are accurate, which is really a crime. You know, it's a great tool that we can help people with, so we've really tried to pay attention to that, and I think this issue is going to be pressed dramatically this year. And then the only other things we're doing is we have a financial aid package that is not like a lot of universities. It's just a bunch of numbers, but it's actually a brochure. And we try to get rid of financial aids. We don't use terms like net. We use out-of-pocket. Your out-of-pocket cost is. And then on the adjacent page, we put these are tools to help you pay your out-of-pocket costs, which has links to different sites. It's got links to our tuition payment plan, a variety of things. And our financial aid package really has 16 different variable fields. It's automated, it's highly complex. And so, for example, if you're doing a science major is going to get something different from an undecided student. Honors student's going to get something different. Florida, if anybody here is from Florida, we have very, let me just say, funky financial aid. So Florida kids have many different things embedded in their package. And we also have a FAFSA assistance program that we pay for. And we use Cegment for that too. So for certain populations, they get assistance completing their FAFSA, where a professional gets on the phone and walks them through completing a FAFSA. And it's helped increase our yield for certain populations, especially first-gen populations, like depends on the year, but we've done this for 2 years, 6 to 20%. So these are some of the things that we're doing, and there are a lot of creative things that can be done, and if we have time, I'll get into some of those things that we're doing too.
Thanks, Brett. We are, excuse me, traditionally Michigan State has delivered our awards in first, second week of March, and this year we're going to be moving it up to around the middle of December. And so our president kind of gave us an initiative and said, hey, we'd like for you guys to try and figure out a way to make this work. And so it was a lot to start thinking about moving the whole process up that number of months and really trying to pull all of the necessary information and numbers and things together. And so, like Brent, we also use the net price calculator, and Cegment helps us with that. And it's been great because we've been able to improve what we had before. And now our estimates that come off of the net price calculator are about 90% accurate. And so that helps students and families out quite a bit when we're able to direct them there so that they get a better idea of what they should be expecting to pay in terms of the out-of-pocket costs. One of the other unique things that we're going to be doing this year with Cegment is traditionally our financial aid estimate has been 4 pages, and we're going to go to 8. And so with some of the extra real estate, we're going to be trying to demystify some of the same things that he was talking about as it relates to helping families better understand the terminology and how to get through this process and begin to, if you will, maybe begin to put apples to apples and not so much the variance that exists amongst other institutions, trying to figure that out at the dinner table together and, you know, which do we do? Which is the best package? How do we do this? So we want to continue to be, I think, a better service provider for families, helping them understand the process, the information that's there, what they're actually going to get, and where they can find the resources to help afford to come to Michigan State University.
We usually begin admitting students the first week in November, and then within a week of that is their merit award. We have traditionally set the full financial aid award the around 1st of March, like similar to John. We're moving ours up just a month to the 1st of November. For my colleagues on the higher education side, I have a student financial services model in my division of enrollment management, which means that at some time ago, about 6 years ago, they combined the financial aid office with the bursar function. The great thing at that time when you do that for the institution is about 6 years ago, there's efficiencies and usually cost saving with staff and personnel. And from actually the outward facing in terms of our interactions with parents and students, I think I am a big believer in this model, because instead of having families and students bounce between, oh, well, I'm sorry, that's, you know, this is the financial aid office, you're asking a billing question. I need to transfer you to bursar office. So they finish that phone call and then they get passed forward. Well, you know, in that construct is at the University of Delaware, we have a very robust winter term, 5-week-long winter term between the fall and the spring. And that's when, in December, when we would like to be able to move it up to, is when we're actually sending both our winter term and our spring term bills. And so again, recognizing that you can have great people that do great things and very efficiently, but there's still a limit in terms of what they can really do and do it really well. So we have decided to deliberately let that time frame go and begin sending our full awards out on the 1st of February. Like my colleagues, is that we put a lot of effort into our net price calculator. This actually has been core to who I am for many years, both in my prior experience at the University of Vermont and at UD, is that I really wanted to do the absolute best I could to make sure that families, when they used it, had the best view of what their probable awards are going to be. And so that's what we've done to make sure. And actually, when we send the merit aid awards out beginning soon after the 1st of November, there's going to be 2 reminders on there. One is to remind them that we're in a PPY year and that they can go ahead and start filling out their FAFSA if they have not already, and when they're going to get their full award so that there's a serious expectation, and we're going to refer them to our NPC, and so that if you really want to know now to get a really good estimate, you can do that, because I think it is a valuable part of it. And again, like my colleagues, we have found great value in terms of our financial aid award letter that we partner with Cegment on, in terms of demystifying. We had the same goals as my colleagues did, and all of you know, as complex and as anxiety-filled as just the whole applying process is. For families, even if they're old hands, filling out the FAFSA is the hardest thing in the world. I mean, it's just really hard. And to do it, and again, if for families that's the first time, or figuring out how they might be able to put this package together if it's a good fit. And so that's, again, personalized as my colleagues. And so that's our plan for this year.
Out of curiosity, those of you on the college side, could you raise your hand if you're planning to move up the time frame of sending out award letters? So most of you. Is anybody starting to send out in October? A couple of you. How about November? About a third of you. December? How many of you, if you could just raise your hand, have decided to stay with the March kind of time frame, February, March? Okay, thanks. So, excuse me, I'm gonna jump right in and share a few different slides with you with some, hopefully some interesting data and some good information for you. But this is on the family side. We ask, is cost, or how important of a factor is cost in your college selection process? My takeaway from this was I was surprised it wasn't a higher percentage. Those planning to apply for aid, 76 3/4 say that cost is playing a significant role. And for all respondents, it drops to 67%. I don't know, I was just always under the impression it was even higher than that, but that's some interesting feedback that we got from the presentation. This is interesting from the admission professional side and the financial aid side. This shows you a breakdown of the key word here, or key phrase, is perceived significance of PPY and early FAFSA. As you can see here, financial aid, actually, the financial aid professionals are expecting less of a change this year, but they think it's going to increase significantly next year and following years. Admissions professionals are much more concerned about the changes this year, and I think that's legitimate. Everybody's concerned that if it changes, is it going to affect your class? Are there going to be issues with that? But one takeaway from this is pretty much 3/4, 75% of all different populations expect next year and the following years to have significant changes. So this slide is a very busy slide, so it's going to take, hopefully you all can see it pretty well, but this is just putting in perspective the whole college search process, how it's been, how it will be. Some things to note here. The blue lines are pre-prior year. The orange lines are post-prior year. So no surprise, the college search process, their senior year of high school, and this is the time frame we're looking at as their senior year, the college search process stays pretty much the same. The admission and application phase actually shrinks a little bit. Students were doing applications through March, and it's expected to slow down a little bit. If you look at the middle, this is the big change, and we all know FAFSA is moving up 3 months. So that's going to have a big effect. And what's really strange there, or a big, I guess, indicator of what's going to happen, is the FAFSA application phase really increases in time. So in the past, you can see with the blue line, it was much shorter. Award letter delivery goes from the February-March timeframe to the October through April timeframe. And this is interesting. I want to get some insight from the panel as well, but I'll ask them some questions here in a couple of minutes after we go through some more slides. But so you all can start thinking, the college selection and deposit process, I think that's the biggest change that we're all seeing with prior year. All of a sudden, students have their awards in November. They don't have to commit till May 1st. So all the marketing, everything that's done on the college side, how are you changing that? How are you thinking about it? How are you keeping the students engaged from when they've been admitted, received their packages, until they enroll? And we'll get to that here in a second, some feedback. Here's the implications of the change. Number 2 and number 3 tend to be, or they seem to me to be, the biggest impact. It'll be interesting to see after this first year kind of what happens. And here schools are moving up their awarding next year after seeing what happens this year. Personally, I'm interested in finding out or watching and seeing this year what the competition is going to be like between institutions. So if somebody's peers start sending out their award letters October 5th, like Tampa, or moves it up considerably, and then you're still sitting there planning to send out your awards on March 15th, what kind of effect if schools will actually jump forward this year, or how it will affect the coming years as well. Just to run through this quickly, admissions application phase now coincides with the financial aid FAFSA application phase. And then 2 and 3 are the ones that I thought were the biggest impact, which is the timing of estimated and/or actual award letter delivery will now vary. In the past, it's been very much the same time frame. And like I just said, students will have much longer to decide. There's a longer college selection and deposit phase, and increased opportunity to convey institutional value. So that goes back to the whole marketing and what schools plan to do. Also, a reminder, I know this is a lot of information on these slides. It is available for download, so don't feel like you have to take ferocious notes, but you will be able to download the presentation from NACAC site. So this jumps into, and I think these are some big percentages, but what colleges, or what changes colleges are considering. 7 out of 10 colleges will provide earlier awards according to this study, and almost 6 out of 10 will provide earlier estimated awards. I know in the past people have done estimated awards. Some financial aid awards, there's always revisions to the final award letter. But I think what we're hearing, at least, is that a lot of schools are going to start doing estimated award letters, whether they do it off their net price calculator or send it out. That's becoming much more of interest to colleges, is one thing that we're hearing, and then sending the final a little bit at a later date. So what changes are colleges considering? So looking at this, almost, I guess it would be about 6 out of 10 plan a shift in admissions timing. Half told us that they plan a more robust engagement earlier in the cycle, moving up and talking more about financial aid. And this goes back to the whole shift in the whole admissions process and moving up and engaging students earlier, because they will be applying for financial aid earlier. And then finally, 28% plan to institute an early decision or early action program. So this is also very interesting, and it definitely mirrors what I'm hearing out in the market, is what type of colleges are changing. As we talk to colleges, and we all know there's a whole wide range of different types of colleges, but the highly selective, the nationally recognized colleges that I talk to, a lot of them are not as concerned as other colleges this year. They don't think there's going to be huge significant changes for them this year. And like I said earlier, I think it's going to be interesting to see what if they change next year. But what we are hearing is those schools that are more tuition driven, that are a little bit more competitive, a little bit smaller, a lot of those are expecting to make significant changes. And that's very true from pretty much everybody I've talked to. What I'd like to do is I would like to ask the panel to talk a little bit. I've always been intrigued when I go to schools. Some schools have not really had much conversation around PPY. Other schools have had a ton of conversation. Some schools, the president has led the discussion. Other schools, it's left up to the admission department. So at this point, I'd like to ask the panel, and we can start with you, John, just what your thoughts are on the whole longer deposit selection period, what you're changing, if you're planning to implement more engagement in the selection process after they've received their award, and give us a little bit of insight. I'd love to hear what your experience was at Michigan State and all the other schools, but internally.
We put together a group between the admissions office and financial aid and our communications department. And we kind of sat down and we began to ask ourselves a lot of the same kinds of questions that I'm sure most institutions were asking. But one of the big ones that we really kind of struggled with was, what are families going to be asking themselves, or what types of questions will they be asking that they didn't ask before? So you've got 3 more months now to kind of mull over these financial aid estimates. What sorts of questions will you be asking yourselves that maybe you didn't ask before? And one of the reasons why was because if institutions are going to be supplying financial aid estimates earlier, because of our processes and setting tuition and when the board meets and those kinds of things, we're going to have to submit another estimate out to the students that is more of a final award. So our process right now, when we were awarding back in mid to late February all the way up until April, we pretty much felt comfortable that we were submitting our best award to the students and they were getting that. If we move this up 3 months, the students and families are going to get a second award most likely from some institutions because it's going to be a best guess. And so, it really depends on the institution's ability to guess as to what tuition is going to be set at, what the board is going to do, if they're public, how the state funding is going to rest, or even where, how things look from a financial standpoint for their endowment and what kinds of returns that they received this year. And so, we've gotten out in front now with PPY and families are going to have this additional time, but we've now, as an institution, have to move our systems a few months forward to try and catch up with this whole piece. And so I think, like I said, we just really struggle with what are we going to do. So I think institutions who are going to be giving awards in October and November, hopefully they came up with a really strong communication strategy, because it's going to be a long time for a student to be sitting with your information. And that because they're applying to more institutions, they're going to be waiting. So if my number one choice or my number two or top three, if they're not going to give an award until January, February, they're going to wait and they're going to hold that. Hopefully they don't lose it. I mean, there are a lot of things that can happen between October and January, February. So this is more than just, I think, our institutions getting to the table first. It's getting to the table at a point when the decision is most likely to be made based on the competition and those kinds of things. So when we sat down, that was the number one thing for us to really look at, was how do we alter our comm strategy? How do we adjust things? And we know that the estimate that we put forward is going to be pretty good, maybe about 85%, 75%, somewhere in that range, pretty close to our net price calculator. We believe we're going to be there because our budgets are set almost 3 years in advance. So we've gotten the approval already from the administration to move forward with those as an estimate if they're not able to give it. But certainly it impacts scholarships, it impacts a lot of other things that are out there that we've got to try and now pull all of this information together and really give a good decision to the families and really communicate to them along the way. So I think that's part of why you were seeing the graph that Matt put up that kind of showed this first year we don't see much of a change because it's going to be a little gray until our internal systems can kind of catch up to the new mandate. So.
Well, the University of Tampa, we've historically done non-binding early action, and we roll, we either accept or deny students in order that we get the applications complete. So for us, the adjustment was relatively easy in that regard, and we're usually, even though we say we have rolling admissions, it's we usually start wait listing by February 1st. So it's a little bit deceiving calling it rolling admissions in that regard, but it made adjusting to PPY a lot easier. And I guess I never said my title. I'm Director of Enrollment Management. Myself, the Director of Financial Aid, and the VP for Enrollment Management gave the President a proposal, and he agreed, and the board. We typically, in my 11 years at Tampa, we have never had an increase of tuition. Only once have we had 3%. It's usually 2.5%. So we are going to continue to go along that path, so again, it made things pretty easy. But one thing I really think that people are underestimating the impact of prior. Personally, I think it's one of the biggest changes in the last 30 years. And I think it opens up the window to one-time FAFSA filing. I speak on financial aid reform with one of my colleagues, John Borowski at Marquette University, and Frank Palmasani, who's a high school counselor, many of you may know from Chicago, who does a lot of financial aid reform. And we think it's going to affect a lot of different things. Like, I think yield rates, and when I say yield, I mean accept to deposit or enroll yield. I think for some universities it's going to go up, and I think for some universities it's going to go down. And so the jury's out on that one, and I think we're all anxious to see what's happening. But I think on the positive side, I think summer melt is going to reduce. And that's a big deal in Florida because a lot of universities have double-digit summer melt. And it's going to, instead of having, I mean, think about it. On average, our research shows, on average, currently, financial aid packages come out March 20th across the country, March 20th. Now think about having 40 days to make what is ultimately, other than getting married, where you go to college is probably one of the biggest influencing decisions on your life. So you've got, you know, kind of a gun to your head for 40 days to figure out affordability. Now people are going to have up to 6 months to figure it out, and that's going to be a really good thing. It's going to reduce summer melt. Families are going to have a lot of time to figure out versus doing it over the summer and then changing their mind last minute. And I think it's going to increase retention in that regard, too. I see no reason why it won't. And that's going to be good for students and good for universities. And now, in terms of at Tampa, what we're going to do, I mean, because there's a lot of ways to view getting an early award. I mean, I personally think that's kind of that university's being on it in action, you know, how well they can deliver a financial aid award versus universities that wait till late. I mean, there's something administratively wrong there, I personally believe. So I don't know that all families are going to think that way, but I think many will. But others are going to wait for their award. Now, what we do, you know, most of our students at Tampa, I already said they come from out of state. We have a very weird demographic. The average student, just the U.S. student, comes to Tampa to study from 900 miles away. So we have about 16 admitted student receptions in large areas of the country, from Southern California to, well, I guess I shouldn't call Concord, New Hampshire a large area of the country, but that's as far northeast as we do it. But what we do in these are very unusual events. I actually speak briefly, I bring a professor, but I bring 8 students with me that are cross-section at University of Tampa. I don't script them, and they talk about different aspects of University of Tampa, all geared toward making your decision. And homesickness is the #1 reason students leave University of Tampa, so we drive that home, that homesickness thing. But what we do that's very unusual is we bring a financial, we try to deliver, I've already said we try to deliver awards early. And we also offer to students in our messaging prior to those admitted student receptions that we will go over their financial award with them. So I bring a financial aid counselor, and I have senior counselors with me, and we'll pull up on our VPN network their award. And it's like a 5-minute speed dating thing on going over their award. If we can't answer the question, we give them our card and we'll follow up when we go back to Tampa. But not only do we go over their award with them, but I give my counselors, and this is where a lot of people freak out, but I give my counselors I empower them to make changes up to $4,000 on an award if they see that it's necessary and warranted for that student, and that student's a good fit. And our discount rate, we have a very low discount rate at Tampa, and I came in about 1% below. So it doesn't have to kill your discount rate. Now, these are very creative things that other universities could then move this up to open houses. Like previously, our admitted student receptions are late February to mid-March, but now there's no reason universities, especially small universities, couldn't counsel people during open houses. So I think this lets universities plan and get very creative about different things they can do to really be upfront and honest and informative to the parents. And these aren't all great conversations, mind you. I mean, some people, especially in needy areas like Boston and Chicago, people realize sitting there with their son or daughter that they can't make it work. Now, for us, we're a big transfer school, so we try to drive home. You know, you can still have a University of Tampa education. It just makes more sense for you to transfer there. So these are some of the things that universities can do and I guess have more flexibility to do with prior.
I could use $4,000 if you have the ability to do that.
You seem like you're homesick, Matt.
My team, my Director of Student Financial Services, Director of Admissions, and I actually began planning literally last year right after NACAC. It was, as you know, pretty soon right after the decision, to begin identifying what course of actions do we want to go, what are the impacts, what are the communications plans, et cetera. And there's two types, and my colleagues have talked a lot about the communications and very consistent in terms of what we're intending to do to put out information to students early, and we've done a very robust, what we hope is robust, communications to our counselor networks, incorporating it to open houses and high school visits, et cetera, to try to get this word out, as I'm sure our high school colleagues are also trying to do for their families. But we also have to think about the returning students. You think, well, what about the returning students? It's still an important piece because, in fact, now we can actually move up the financial aid awards for returning students actually earlier too, which I think will help those families. We try to make UD as affordable for every student as possible, but there are some students who come to UD and they're stretching, and you know, we try to help them out, but sometimes that stretch might not be the best thing for them. So it allows us actually to move some of those conversations maybe earlier in terms of, like Brent, maybe this isn't your best choice, but maybe if you'd like to transfer back to UD in a year or two, that would be a great idea. So that's another big piece of it for us. What I think is going to happen with the longer window actually is negotiation. We all, at least I'm sure on the college side, have seen continued increases in the number of calls that you get to say, well, school X gave me this, and what are you going to do for me? And I think now, as opposed to being pressed into about a 6-week window, which was bad enough unto itself, will now stretch out from anywhere from, I've already got my award from so-and-so school in November, what's your award going to be? Well, we're sending out on 1st of February, and you know, what are they going to expect? And we're not sure what to, what does that really mean? I mean, the impact on our staff, et cetera, as we go through the process. The other thing that we actually have to be very prepared for, and financial aid offices, all financial aid offices have to do, is personal judgment. Like Brent, many of us have counselors who can make immediate decisions with cases where family income has changed in a way that might be significant in terms of changing their award for your institution. And at certain points, then it raises up within the office to different supervisory levels. Well, and it happens a little bit when they submitted the most prior year, where if, we carried this year, it would have been the 16 tax return, there might have been something happened in January or February or March, mom or dad lost a job or something like that, that would cause you to maybe adjust an award for an incoming first-year student. But it wasn't that much, actually, But now, where students are now, their award is based off of the 15 tax year. So those families now have had a full year of potentially very different income. Now, if it's positive, I don't think they're going to tell us. I'm just going to go out on a ledge, But if it's negative, my guess is they're going to tell us, and rightfully so, in terms of, and then we're going to need, because of ultimately for federal reasons, we're going to need a copy of the 16 tax return anyway, et cetera. So that's another thing that we're preparing for, because we really think that that's also going to increase, and it's not really negotiation, it's actually realistic appeals that we've always done. I think, like John, and I don't know what Brent's board, when they make decisions, I think the other thing that you have is that the reality is, yes, the awards are going out early, but a lot of awards are still quote-unquote estimated, and they're still going to have all the caveats that they have in the past, which is, as our NPCs do actually, that says this is based on our projected tuition rates increases, blah, 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 and our board doesn't make a final decision until X date. Now, like John, right now we have a pretty good idea of what the 17 is going to be. In February, we'll have a much better idea, but the reality is the board votes on the tuition and fees in May. So, it's a good chance that students are still going to receive 2 different awards, with the February award maybe better than, well, we're sending it out 1st of February, so we hopefully won't be too far off of what the end state will be.
Thank you. So what are the obstacles to change? This is probably pretty similar to what all of you experience at your schools as well, but this is what was listed out by the study participants. Finalization of state aid awards is seen as the biggest obstacle to moving to prior year, which is not surprising. Finalization of Pell Grant tables, that's pretty much equal with the state aid awards. So a couple of things that are totally out of your hands, and that's not really helpful when you can't control something, but you are supposed to be moving up the time frame. Number 3 was programming a financial aid management system, your FAMs, including ICER download and packaging mechanics. So that's also way up there. Board of Trustees approval of tuition and fees, moving that up. I was at a couple of schools last week that they still don't know. Is there anybody out there did your boards move it up, or it did move up? That's good. Is there anybody that doesn't know tuition? It didn't get moved up in the prior year? Okay, thanks. Increased requests for professional judgment in handling special financial aid circumstances. That's a little bit to what Chris just talked about as well. That was at 53%. Finalization of institutional awarding strategy fell down much lower at almost 40%, and then there were a smattering of others that went, that people gave us feedback in the study as to what they consider to be their obstacles. When we open up the floor for questions too, I would love to invite, if any of you want to share what your obstacles are, if you want to ask questions about other people's obstacles and how they overcame it, that would be great as well. So let's get emotional really quick. This is what everybody was telling us on the college side, what their thoughts were about prior year. And in looking at this, the dark orange color is private, not-for-profit colleges. Blue is public, and the gray is private for-profit colleges that took this study. So, as you can see, excited and invigorated, curious, neutral, concerned, anxious, and daunted. So it's the whole scale. So everybody in this room, raise your hand if you're excited and invigorated. Not very many of you. Not surprising. Curious. I think that's what I would have to say for myself. Neutral, anybody? Okay. How many of you are concerned? So double arm, so you're really concerned. And finally, anxious and daunted. A couple of you. Cool. Well, that kind of goes along with the percentages that we see in this. I just thought it was kind of interesting to hear what the people thought, and it's pretty much mirrors what everybody just answered in here. So before we jump into asking questions, sharing ideas, sharing feedback, just wanted to recap. So just so you know, from the family's perspective, 3/4 of respondents say that cost is an important factor. 90% want financial aid award letters earlier, and 40% of that 90% want them in the fall of their senior year. 69%, almost 7 out of 10, believe this change will be a benefit. I think most of us agree that. And something that I find interesting is that over 80% of the people believe earlier awarding, whether they attend the institution or not, puts that institution in a positive light. So they will have a better impression of a school that does move up. They see it. Some of the feedback was they see it as being accommodating, trying to work with families and giving them a longer period of time to make decisions and find out how to pay for college. And then the colleges side, how are colleges planning, or how are colleges responding? Almost 7 in 10 colleges plan to make major changes. Over 3/4 plan to shift their awards earlier, and a large majority believe that it's a competitive disadvantage to colleges that do not change. So that's kind of a recap of some of the things. We also have this whole study, all of the feedback available for download on our website. You're also able to manipulate the data and look at schools just like yourself so that you can kind of compare yourself to your peers. So feel free to go to the Cegment website and download that. We also have hard copies of it in our booth, and that's the only promotion I will do. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor. The mics will be on if you want to walk up, or you can just stand up and talk. It's kind of a big room, but I would love to hear high school counselors from the college side, questions, feedback, sharing of stories. It looks like it's all high school people, so this is going to be fun. So let's go ahead and start with you and open up the floor.
double hands concerned.
Oh, I think he's turning it on, yeah.
Okay. Hello? Hello?
There you go.
Okay. My name's Jenny. I work at Rye Country Day School in New York, and I'm obviously fortunate enough to work at a school that has a lot of resources, but we do bring in a lot of kids from the Bronx, and we work with a lot of CBOs. And one of the things I think that's, when Prior first came out, I was really excited as to what it could do for students, but now I'm very concerned, especially thinking about our CBO partners and schools that work with much higher financial need populations, because to get them to get their apps done by November 1st is a challenge. And then it's like, oh, and now we have to do this really complex financial aid process in the same time frame. And I'm worried that, early bird gets the worm. Really, our more affluent and more educated families are going to be able to manage this process, and what it's going to hurt most is the students who I want to believe that this philosophical shift and practical shift was meant to advantage. And what I've been hearing from you guys is sort of thinking about this as this excellent enrollment management tool, and I hear that, but I feel like I'm thinking this whole process is just going to, in some ways, advantage colleges more than they already are advantaged in the process. And I'm just wondering if we can maybe think about kind of the bird's eye view in terms of, this is also kids are in school and doing college applications and doing financial aid in their most toughest classes. And I just feel the earlier push, I don't know if it's educationally as sound. And I'm just very concerned about that. And I'm curious to hear what you have to say, because I think some of the stats of, they want their aid award earlier, but they're not thinking maybe of what that means in terms of what they're going to have to do earlier. And does the people who don't file under those earlier deadlines, which I also see colleges creeping up those deadlines, does that mean that the ones, again, the most disadvantaged kids are going to be even more disadvantaged?
Great point.
I think that's a fantastic perspective, and thank you for sharing it, because it's got some thoughts going through my mind. I think one of the key questions is the institutional policy towards how they handle aid. There are schools that have, if you don't apply by this deadline, then you may not, it's like we run out of money type of conversations. Our institution is not like that. So I think it, as many things, right, come back to is the institutional's priorities towards access and opportunity, and what does that really mean, and these issues, plus, later applications, what are the populations we get later applications? Again, if we close off different majors, because we admit to majors at UD, I could close off majors to really great kids from, again, populations that, again, are underserved and don't get the type of guidance that they need. So we're ensuring that the policies that we say, if this is what type of aid these type of students are going to get, they're going to get that aid whether they they submitted their FAFSA on the 1st of October or the 1st of February, or the 15th of February as we've had, or the 1st of March, as long as we get it, so we can react to it before the end of the school year. But it's a great point. One of the things that we have is we do have a CBO partner network that we work with, and we're actually working with them also to do a couple things. One is to share the information and also do some of the workshops similar to what Brent was talking about.
I'll just make a couple quick comments on what you said, and clearly the burden is on the student. If a student doesn't apply early, they can't take advantage of prior. But you've got to remember, this is all good. They're not going to be any worse off than they were under the current system by delaying. They're going to just shorten their window for knowing what the cost is. So it's not going to be, if they do delay, they're not going to be worse off than they are under the current system, and yet they have the opportunity. Now again, it's up to them, and I realize that disadvantaged kids and first-generation kids aren't going to apply. Many of them aren't going to apply early, and that's going to hurt them and let them not take advantage of prior. But it's there, and eventually the word will get out, and we're undergoing a sea change right now, and the whole mindset will shift to early. And we all know early is good when it comes to applying to universities, and now the stakes are higher.
But is it educationally sound? Like, the kids, they just get back to school. I don't know. I feel like every shift that I feel that happens in enrollment management seems to be not sort of thinking about, what that means. Kids are getting back this week in their toughest classes on top of all this stuff. I just think, we need to think about that as a larger professional community.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that in the nearly 20 years that I've been in the business, I've been working with community-based organizations and underserved student populations. And during that time frame, it's been interesting. I'm starting to see more parents get involved in the process, only in the last 3 to 4 years. And as more of the students who are in that population get their parents to be involved in this process, once the parents have kind of gotten into it, they want to get it over with. So I think you're going to be okay as we're starting to see it, because think about how long helicopter parents who morphed into the hovercraft and the spaceship parents and those who just instantly appear all the time. I mean, even corporate America has already changed because they show up the first day of work and they started negotiating packages for their kids. I mean, so the rest of the world has been moving, and some of these parents haven't quite caught up to the concept yet, but it's okay, because as they begin to move and now this change is happening, I still see it as a positive. But you're absolutely right in terms of all of the other stuff that's kind of, and so like I said, we've put this new time frame out here, but the rest of our systems have got to now catch up. And so as we get through it and we go through a few more rounds, we're going to find ways, I think, to work through this. In the city of Detroit, we do a big on-site event with all 15 of the public universities for students from the Metro Detroit area. And we bring us all together. And students have an opportunity to not only apply to all of our schools, and they drop off their supporting application documents in the morning, but then they come back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and pick up decisions. This one program for the last 7 years has changed the application phase for this group of students, that where typically we would wait till March to see the bulk of the applications come from the Metro Detroit kids. And now we get those in November. And so we've been able to change that. So we're going to have to continue to do things of this kind of nature with this particular population of students across the country to make things better, that they get in the process, but parents have got to be involved. The system is set up for parents to be involved. And so I know it's still scary for a number of those families and their kids to, especially with first generation and heck, even second generation. Things have just changed so much and so fast, it's not even the same anymore. So we've just got to continue to educate.
Thanks.
I'm wondering the degree to which each of you might be able to comment on how this conversation applies not just to the new applicant, the incoming freshman, but to students who are continuing, and how documents need to be filed for those students. Did that make sense? Does my question make sense?
Yes, it does. So as we thought through the communications plan for the first year applicant, et cetera, we went through a communications planning campaign for our returning students. And so we are going to begin communicating to students that now there's the PPY, that they can begin applying their FAFSAs early. What does it mean? As I talked about the first year students, again, I think this issue of what we're not sure about is what is going to be impact on personal judgment. Again, that opportunity to sit there if there has been a significant change, to really take into consideration. One of the questions that has already come to mind, and I apologize, and if somebody else in the audience knows the answer to this, one of the questions is, do students really have to submit another 15 tax return? Because they have actually already submitted that. And I don't know if we've really gotten an answer from the department. If one of my other colleagues is maybe closer to their team and knows that, the returning students right now may not even have to submit a FAFSA this year, because we have that tax return if it's gone through the aspect. So those are the type of things that we're going to try to communicate. But our packages will, for returning students, which in the past have gone out in June, are now actually going to be able to go out in May, if not even earlier than that, which again I think is good for students who again, we do the best you can to make it affordable, et cetera, but there's still sometimes gaps, and they may look ahead and just say this isn't the right thing. At least they're finding out a little bit earlier, so that if they want to explore their transfer opportunities, they can do that.
There's somebody over here that knows the answer, I think.
What's that? Right. 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 Okay, thanks.
And that would
The
make
answer
sense.
was yes. If you couldn't hear that, they thought they would. Okay.
So yes,
Thank
they
you.
will have to submit another FAFSA this year with IRTs.
And that would make sense with different state changes in state grants and scholarships, as well as Pell tables, this whole idea. And, you know, I think the federal government's going to have to, this is going to have an impact on the federal government, because all our presidents got a letter encouraging each university to come up with financial aid packages earlier, yet we've got this Pell table issue. I mean, think about having to repackage like thousands of students. Sometimes tens of thousands of students in some large universities' cases. And it's just unnecessary. And this is part of the, again, John Borowski, Frank Palmisani, and I, this is part of our reform, that we think that Pell tables should be changed in 4-year increments as administrations move in. It only makes sense. I mean, for what? For $38 difference? We're repackaging somebody for $38? Now, come on. And related to your question about the continuing students, there is a lot of evidence that we should move toward one-time FAFSA filing. I don't think there's an economist in the country that will tell you that income has increased. It's been flat, and actually I have data that shows it's decreased within the last 10 years, about 3%. So at Tampa, which again, I think we're very reflective of the country because we have students from every state, in the last 10 years, only about, of our existing student population from when they come in to when they graduate, only about 6% of them does their EFC change enough to warrant a change in their financial aid package. So why does the other 94% have to repeatedly fill out FAFSAs? Does our financial aid offices have to repeatedly repackage people for nothing, basically? It's incredible bureaucratic waste. So there's no reason we can't do one-time FAFSA filing. Yes, it would increase the number of appeals, but we already have so many appeals, it's incredible anyway. So it wouldn't be a huge percentage increase, but it would be an increase. And then there is a way to manage the stop in and stop out, like find people like me that has 1 kid in, then you've got 2 kids in college, then you've got 3 kids in college. So definitely my EFC is changing. But there's ways to manage that, and I think this is going to really open the door for one-time FAFSA filing.
Hear from a college now?
Yes, thank you. As the slide said, one of the biggest obstacles on our side of the desk is the finalization of state funding. And I just wanted to see what everyone was doing to handle that. For us in particular, we're a state where we have a promise scholarship where it doesn't cover full tuition, but it's a sizable amount of money for students of a certain academic profile. But for the last cycle, that funding wasn't finalized until June. There was some state budget issues, and so we're hoping it's earlier, but it's certainly not going to be early enough to go with the new packaging cycle. So I just wanted to see what everyone was doing to handle those state funding issues that may come later.
Well, at Michigan State, the state of Michigan has drastically reduced student support as far as something similar to the promise. So there are different counties throughout the state and school districts that have created kind of their own promises, if you will, that are not really fully contingent on state funding. However, our Board of Trustees and the management team at Michigan State have been pretty good about estimating the changes that are coming. And so one of the things we're seriously looking and concerned about right now are some new taxes for road improvement and some other things that are said to take money away from the educational budget within the state. And so if that happens, we've already made some plans for that contingency, but those are the kind of things that we're constantly looking at and saying, okay, what will this do for our budget if this happens? And so typically they've been able to make some changes, but early on when the state was going through the financial crunch that the entire country was going through, we started making serious cuts at that time and laying people off a little bit in certain areas to help build our budgets to manage this. So,
I am a big believer in clear expectations. I think what PPY does is provide better information earlier, but due to the things that you're talking about, including the when, different states make decisions for a public system, sometimes into the summer. And the University of Delaware, Delaware doesn't make a decision on a state program till July. So it does not provide perfect information earlier. And what we talked about, the fact that, some of our awards are still going to be estimated awards, but earlier. So again, the student has better information, we hope, right? But not perfect information until some of these things begin to process through. What we do at Delaware is, because of number of years and hopefully no changes at the state level, we do put an amount in the award called a tentative state scholarship award, so that's aware, it's in the formula. And again, what we do is, if the state comes in less, we'll usually pick it up. If it comes in more, but it's just better for, again, we provide the best information we can to the students.
In Florida, we have these funky Bright Future scholarships, as well as for private universities, Florida Resident Access Grant. I see some of my Florida colleagues in the audience. So we do estimate, and they've been fairly consistent the last couple of years, but we've got a really interesting dilemma in Florida. We've got this ridiculous thing called the Bright Future Scholarship that's not based on need. It's just based on a student's SAT or GPA. We subsidize the rich kids to go to school in Florida, so that really makes a lot of sense. But anyway, what's interesting is, because of the change in the SAT, we know that a 1440 on the new one was a 1390 in the old one. So the state hasn't changed the SAT requirements. So a huge population is going to be eligible for this money, which of course the state hasn't budgeted for, nor have they, and we know how quickly legislators move, nor have they changed it. So I don't know if anybody's even realized it yet. I think they're all up there in Tallahassee with their pants down until they're going to figure this out too late. And all these students, because they have to have a state mandate and vote on changing it. So we have a really interesting thing going on right now in Florida. So great question.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ed Schoenberg. I'm college counselor at Bellarmine College Prep in San Jose, California, but I'm also a twofer. Until 2014, I was a VP for enrollment management. I want to share a fear. I'll lob the bomb out there and see what you all have to say about that. I worked in my entire career for legitimate, not-for-profit colleges, and the last college I worked at, I had a president and a board chair who believed that we should move up the May 1st national candidates reply date. And this is not uncommon with people on boards and presidents. My fear is now that with the earlier packaging of financial aid, that there will be some push by some leadership at some colleges to question whether or not the May 1st deadline makes sense anymore. So I just wondered if there is any fear on the parts of the panel members or anyone in the audience thinks that that might be something that gets some pushback in the future as this rolls out and plays out, not next year perhaps, but years to come.
Well, I'll just quickly say, I'm sure some people will try to push something like that, because of course everybody's an expert in admissions, right? Even especially board members. But I'm not too concerned about it, because I think the masses are so much against it. And of course this would take away any advantage of prior, and I know that NACAC has already made statements regarding this. So I would hope that the logical and people who are in this business would push back at any movement to do that.
Agree.
Hello, my name is Brendan Williams from U Aspire. I was just wondering how at your institutions, if you think there's going to be a shift in the institutional verification policies, such as requiring more non-tax filing verification letters from the IRS. Do you envision any changes in those?
Well, we're already seeing an increase, slight, but that's primarily, as I understand it, at least from our financial aid department, because the feds have kind of given us and we just did it because we expected there were going to be a few more, especially going with 2-year-old tax information, that there would be a bit more verification processing taking place. So we're expecting it. We anticipated it. We did a little bit of it this year. So I don't see it as being a huge barrier. I think it just needs to be more information, that it's a completely random process. And so, you know, with a few more people going through it, they just need to understand what it is.
And I should say, at least at Tampa, it ranges really wildly. I mean, some years we'll have 33%, and we've had a year where it's been 47%, where we felt like they're picking on us. So
Well, we had 45 one year.
okay, so it does vary wildly, so it's kind of hard to really know what's, because it is supposedly random.
I also encourage anybody in the audience, if you have feedback for any of the questions that are being answered, to feel free to raise your hand and speak to the question or address it. So.
Good morning. Sigismani, Southeastern Pennsylvania. Do you anticipate that any colleges, including your own, would compute a financial aid package without a corresponding application?
We will not.
Are you talking about like an estimated award letter?
No. What I'm getting at is, if I'm a savvy family and I complete the FAFSA on October 2nd and I send it to 30 different schools, conceivably I could have a financial aid package before I even have to apply and save money and not apply if the award's not good enough.
It's actually a violation of NACAC rules and guidelines to award scholarships without an application. So,
Well, this is need-based. It's not a scholarship.
well, I would say no.
Okay.
There's no chance of that.
Just-
I can't. I
Speak for every institution.
Are there any institutions?
We won't do it either.
Yeah, right. That's what drives our process.
Yeah, but right, but his question is just, hey, we filled out the financial aid, and so, you know, but we're working together more, you know, and that, like I said, it's not going to happen. We wouldn't do it. We're not going to do it for a student who hasn't been admitted.
Why?
So the student, no, but I understand your question. I'm just saying, you know, at Michigan State, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah, her point was, isn't it, and I think it is at most institutions, until you can marry up a the financial aid from the department with an application, nothing happens. The application is kind of the controlling documentation, and that is the way that our process is set up. So yeah, every year, in fact, we get FAFSAs right now, every year, of students who literally have never applied. Maybe they have intended on applying late, and they just never got to it. They made a decision elsewhere, but nothing ever happens with it. We never even package them. It just sits there until we have an admit decision.
I'm thrilled with that answer because I usually want to make sure that I know what the games are ahead of everything else.
And it's a great question, because it's interesting, because to suggest there may be gamesmanship amongst parents, I can't believe it. You know?
I would just add, if a family's in that situation and they really want to know, that's what the net price calculator is for.
Yeah,
You know, to
exactly.
have them go and use that. And if they're using any of the, I would say the universities that are using the Cegment product, we all are pretty confident with the awards on the net price calculator, so they'll get a pretty decent answer.
And if I may, a second piece to that. So we need an application before we get the financial aid package, and addressing what the woman from Rye said. How do I get applications in quicker? Well, there are two platforms out there, the Common App and the Coalition app, that allow students to populate their applications as early as 9th grade. So if I know that there are these places where students can go and get their applications done ahead of time so that they're not doing them all in senior year, that they have much of the demographics done by the time they reach senior year, I'm thinking one unintended consequence of this is there's going to be a lot more colleges that are going to join Common App and Coalition to get this information more quickly. And if I can't join one of those because I don't abide by the criteria, there may be a third one coming from the schools that say, hey, we need to get applications more quickly because ours doesn't come out until August when the student is a rising senior. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got about 4 or 5 minutes left, so.
He was first.
He was first?
He was
Okay.
first.
Yeah. Very
Hello,
nice of
folks.
you. You're very polite.
Chad Terry from Rosemont High School in Minnesota. Just a quick question from the high school side. We're just trying to think logistically about this year. How do we plan our dissemination of information to parents with regard to financial aid? In the past, we've done a January FAFSA completion night, right, for families and parents. And then we've done a fall event that connects to just general information about financial aid for junior parents. So this year we're going to flip-flop those events. We're wondering how you folks feel about that, if you have any suggestions for us related to when that information should come out in the year for parents, especially any other ideas for parent disseminating that information to parents.
I think,
Also, if there's anybody out there that wants to.
I think your process of flip-flopping them is great. I mentioned when the woman from Rye asked, we're actually working with our CBO partners right now to do like FAFSA preparation things this fall, like in October, actually in November, et cetera. I think, you know, and hopefully I know we do, and I'm sure all of you have it front and center, constant reminders to students if they're admitted, et cetera, in terms of that you can do it now and you can do it now. I think this year is the change year. Yep, you're going to do the best we can to try to communicate, but I think your first step was a good one, which is to move that to November.
I would even tell you to leave it open to your juniors who will be rising seniors, and let those parents come now, be a part of the conversation and at least see. I think, you know, and I agree with Chris, I think if, you know, you're doing that and doing the flip, that's a great idea to go ahead and get it started now in October. I mean, much better Halloween theme than to do something in January. So.
Hi, I'm Amanda Miller. I'm with the College Advising Corps. I'm with the Davidson Corps from North Carolina. And just to kind of put this in, again, a counselor perspective, there's a lot of us with red lanyards up here. I have a question, but just a quick insight. Students don't wait to look at all their award letters. A lot of students figure out they get in and they send that enrollment deposit because it's not communicated clearly from the colleges that they have until May 1st, at least not in North Carolina. A lot of schools are saying, enroll now, get your deposit slip. Oh, if you don't hurry up, you're not gonna get guaranteed housing, which I know is in contradiction to what NACAC stands for, but it's still happening. So what I'm seeing on my end is while this may move up and the savvy students who know and have a college advisor are told to wait, not every high school has a college advisor to tell them to wait. So a lot of students are gonna jump on immediately as soon as they get that award letter. They think everything's good because a lot of them don't know how to read it. I had a student bring me an award letter from an institution in Georgia and say, look, I got $47,000. It was all a PLUS loan. So our kids don't know how to read it, so we might, you know, if they have a savvy family or an advocate, it's gonna be great. If they don't, so many kids are gonna fall through. So with that, I have a quick question. My quick question is there a move for, or a resource or a conversation for more transparency on the first come, first serve for state aid? I know it varies from institution to institution, state to state, but when I go back to North Carolina, do I tell parents, oh yes, you need to get it done October 1st, or they have until March 1st, or do I need to contact all 56 institutions in North Carolina and ask them? Like, how is there a way to know what to tell parents to do and have the most accurate information?
Wow, that's a lot. I'll address the last question first. I would think sometime between November 1st and November 30th is a great range to tell your families, and they should be covered in terms of being okay. So within that 60-day time frame of the FAFSA opening up, I would think that most of the schools in North Carolina are going to adhere somewhere between there to help. And I think you're right in terms of that, but I know that that's unique, I think, to your region of the country in terms of the students and their reaction. And so part of this is helping them to become better shoppers. And so, you know, don't just jump on the first thing or the first sale that you see. You very well may end up back at the same sale rack you started at in the mall, right, when you go. But you want to check all of the other stores, so sometimes it's better to wait. And so you just got to, I think, wade through it. And like I said, as we get through these next few years, things will get better and a lot more stuff will fall out that we're going to be able to figure out some new strategies. So.
And I would also say be cognizant of refundable versus non-refundable deposits.
Right.
Because, obviously sometimes, like at Tampa, we've got a refundable deposit, so you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. Well, provided you can front $500, which is a big if. So.
Great, thank you. Well, with that, we've reached the end of the session. I know you all have to get to your next session. I want to thank the panel for being here today, and thank you all for joining us.